Michael Jackson's sudden death from cardiac arrest sent shockwaves around the world. And in the years since, the circumstances surrounding it have remained the subject of intense scrutiny. During the trial of his personal physician, Dr. Conrad Murray, a long list of witnesses took the stand: doctors, paramedics, family members, and household staff, each adding a piece of the puzzle of what really happened inside the singer's rented mansion on Carrollwood Drive. Dr. Rochelle Cooper, the emergency physician who received Jackson at UCLA Medical Center, testified that he was already clinically dead by the time he arrived. Her testimony exposed a critical omission in Murray's account. He never mentioned giving Jackson propofol, claiming instead that he had only administered a small dose of lorazepam. That omission, she suggested, left the emergency team working without a true picture of what was in Jackson's system, a gap that cost precious time. Dr. Christopher Rogers, the medical examiner who conducted the autopsy, was unequivocal in his conclusion. Jackson's death was ruled a homicide caused by acute propofol intoxication. He dismissed the defense's theory that Jackson might have self-administered the fatal dose, arguing it would have been essentially impossible for him to do so without proper medical equipment and expertise. Rogers' testimony was pivotal in reframing the case from one of simple negligence into something far more serious. Dr. Stephen Schaefer, an anesthesiology expert, was equally blunt. He testified that administering propofol in a home setting, without monitoring equipment or backup plan, violated basic standards of patient safety. In his view, Murray had stopped acting as a physician bound by medical ethics and instead had become something closer to an employee catering to Jackson's wishes, prioritizing the singer's demands and his own paycheck over sound medical judgment. Richard Seneff, one of the first paramedics to reach Jackson's bedroom, described a body that showed unmistakable signs of death: fixed, dilated pupils and skin that had already begun to cool, suggesting time had passed since his heart stopped. This directly contradicted Murray's account that Jackson had just collapsed. Martin Blunt, another paramedic on scene, backed up Seneff's account and added a troubling detail of his own. He says he watched Murray gather vials of medication from the floor and stash them in a bag before the ambulance left. Behavior that looked less like the actions of a doctor trying to save a life and more like someone trying to control the evidence. Alberto Alvarez, a member of Jackson's security team, testified that Murray instructed him to gather up 4 bags and bottles and hide them in paper bags before anyone had even called 911. Alvarez also recalled seeing Jackson's children, Prince and Paris, in visible distress as the chaos unfolded around them. Fahim Mohammed, another security staffer, entered the bedroom to find Jackson lying with his eyes and mouth open, a scene he described as clearly indicating cardiac arrest. He also noted that Murray was performing CPR on the soft mattress rather than moving Jackson to a hard surface, a basic error in emergency resuscitation technique. Mohammed was also tasked with getting the children away from the room. Michael Amir Williams, Jackson's personal assistant, received a frantic 35-second call from Murray on the night of the death, begging him to come immediately because Jackson had suffered a bad reaction. Williams' account of the call's brevity and urgency undercut Murray's later, more composed explanations of what had happened. There simply wasn't time in that call for any kind of rehearsed narrative. Kai Chase, the family's personal chef, remembered Murray rushing down the stairs in a panic, shouting for someone to find Prince. Her account of his composure, completely unraveling in real time, stood in contrast to the calm, controlled version of events Murray later gave to investigators. Prince Jackson offered a rare, personal glimpse into his father's state of mind in his final days, recalling that Michael would sometimes cry after calls with concert promoters, repeating that they're going to kill me. It wasn't a figure of speech. Prince's testimony suggested his father genuinely feared for his life under the mounting pressure. Paris Jackson spoke about watching exhaustion consume her father as he pushed through grueling rehearsals for his planned comeback shows. Her testimony wasn't about medical details. It was about what she saw as a daughter, a man breaking down under an unsustainable workload. Kenny Ortega, the director overseeing Jackson's comeback concerts, testified that Jackson had grown visibly unwell in his final days, trembling even in warm weather, confused, disoriented. When Ortega raised concerns and suggested Jackson take time off, he says Murray dismissed them, insisting Jackson was fine despite clear signs otherwise. Ortega's account painted a picture of a doctor more invested in keeping his patient performing than protecting his health. Janet Jackson spoke about the family's repeated but unsuccessful efforts to help Michael with what she described as a dependence on prescription medication, hampered by how private and isolated he had become. She reflected that even with all the help around him, she wasn't sure the outcome was one the family would have chosen. Katherine Jackson, Michael's mother, testified about the pressures placed on her son by concert promoters pushing for the demanding London residency. In her account, the responsibility extended beyond Murray alone. She pointed to AEG Live, the promotion company, for failing to properly oversee Jackson's health and for placing full trust in Murray without real scrutiny. Jermaine Jackson expressed the family's grief and frustration, saying that had they known the extent of the drugs being given to Michael inside his own home, they would have intervened through legal action if necessary. He argued that many of the people around his brother had put financial interests ahead of his well-being. LaToya Jackson raised the possibility of a broader conspiracy tied to Michael's stake in the Sony/ATV music catalog, one of the most valuable assets in the music industry, suggesting that parties with financial motives may have had reasons to want him gone. While the court's focus remained on Murray's culpability, her testimony pushed for consideration of the wider financial world surrounding Jackson's estate. Gave emotional testimony about Jackson's long history of pain management, tracing it back to a serious injury from the well-known 1984 Pepsi commercial accident. She was critical of the doctors who, in her view, had spent years supplying him with medication on demand rather than addressing the root of his dependency, describing a slow, cumulative process rather than a sudden collapse. Testified about receiving large shipments of propofol via FedEx at her own apartment on Murray's behalf, a detail suggesting a deliberate, ongoing supply chain rather than a one-off act of desperation. She also recalled Murray calling her from inside the ambulance, seemingly more focused on damage control than on the emergency in front of him. Shared a haunting recollection of a conversation with Jackson, in which he expressed fear of dying the way her father, Elvis Presley, had from a prescription drug overdose. Her account suggested Jackson was aware of the risk he faced long before his death, even if he felt unable to escape it.